Hollow Creek is a remote mountain community in Boone County, West Virginia, a land where sharp, jagged peaks rise like a fortress wall around the small valleys where generations of Appalachian families have lived. Life here, though full of hardship, was incredibly peaceful. The honest, simple folk lived off their cornfields and herds of free-range black hogs. But in this secluded corner of the world, a horrific crime had been silently committed and concealed, only to find its way to the light in a manner no one could have ever expected. For the past 3 months, every passing day for Sarah Miller had been an unending torment. The pain of losing her daughter, 18-year-old Emily Miller, was like a stone weighing on the mother's soul. 3 months ago, Emily had suddenly vanished. Sarah's current husband, Emily's stepfather, Jack Bullock, explained that the girl had run away after an argument. Jack Bullock was a well-known man in the area, the owner of a large-scale black hog farm. He had a gruff personality but was considered a shrewd businessman. He had personally gone to the county sheriff's office to report his stepdaughter's disappearance. With a grief-stricken face, he claimed Emily was stubborn and rebellious, and after he had scolded her for being lazy, she had angrily packed her bags and left for the city to find work. He even produced a hastily written note supposedly left by Emily. The case at the time was treated as a typical runaway teen incident. The Boone County Sheriff's Office, led by Detective Lieutenant Mark Riley, conducted the basic investigative steps. They issued a missing person alert through local media and sent deputies to her school to ask her friends. But no one knew where she had gone. Her cell phone had been turned off right after she was reported missing. With no signs of foul play and no new leads, the case file was gradually shelved, pending new information. But in a mother's heart, no case is ever shelved. Sarah didn't believe her daughter, a sweet and dutiful child, could leave so cruelly. Emily was all she had left after her first marriage fell apart. She had remarried Jack, hoping to give her daughter a more stable home. Initially, Jack treated Emily well, but Sarah still sensed an invisible distance. In the days after her daughter's disappearance, she lived in agony. She tried to believe her husband's explanation that Emily was just having a temporary fit of anger. But days turned into weeks, and then a month passed without a single call, not one text message. A mother's intuition told her something was terribly wrong. She grew gaunt and thin, her eyes sunken from long, sleepless nights. And then, the dreams began. For about a week, it was the same dream every single night. In the dream, she saw herself walking through the familiar garden behind their house on a rainy, windswept night. She heard her daughter's soft sobs, a mournful, bone-chilling cry. She followed the sound past the pig pens to the corner of the garden, where the large, concrete-lined manure pit was. And then she saw her daughter, Emily's ghostly figure appearing like a wisp of smoke. She was no longer the beautiful, vibrant girl she once was. She looked pitiful, her clothes torn, her body smeared with a filthy, black mud. She was soaked to the bone, shivering from the cold. She stood right beside the edge of the pit, looking at her mother with empty, resentful eyes. "Mom, I'm so cold," her voice echoed, not as a sound, but as a direct thought into her mind. "It hurts so much. I'm right here, behind our house, under that deep, filthy pit. Help me, Mom." And with that, Emily's image dissolved into the rain. Sarah would jolt awake, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding. At first, she thought it was just her grief and longing for her daughter manifesting as nightmares. She tried to push it away by working herself to exhaustion during the day and drinking a little corn whiskey at night to help her sleep. But the dream repeated, night after night, with the same images, the same mournful plea. The eerie consistency turned her fear into a horrifying suspicion. A mother's intuition told her this was no ordinary dream, it was a message. Her daughter was trying to tell her something. Under that deep, filthy pit. Her daughter's words from the dream echoed in her ears. She looked out the window toward the corner of the garden where the manure pit was. A crazy theory, a terrible truth she didn't dare to consider, began to form. No, it couldn't be. How could her husband, Jack Bullock, do such a thing? He was her stepfather, but he had always treated Emily well, providing for her education and needs. But then she remembered what her daughter had confided in her a few weeks before she disappeared. Emily had cried, telling her she felt her stepfather was spying on her when she showered and that several times, her underwear had mysteriously vanished from the clothesline. At the time, Sarah had dismissed it, thinking her daughter was just being overly sensitive at her age. She had even scolded her, telling her not to suspect her stepfather, afraid of disrupting the family peace. Now, connecting all the dots, the sudden disappearance, her daughter's fearful confession, and the haunting, prophetic dream, a terrifying truth became crystal clear. She was living in the same house as a monster. After a sleepless night wrestling with fear and the horrible truth, Sarah made her decision. Early the next morning, while her husband was still asleep, she quietly left the house. She carried nothing but a little cash in her pocket. She walked more than 6 miles of mountain roads before catching a ride straight to the Boone County Sheriff's Office. She had to tell the truth, even if the only clue she had was a dream. She didn't know if they would believe her, but for her daughter, she had to try. At the Boone County Sheriff's Office, Detective Lieutenant Mark Riley, a seasoned investigator, sat across from Sarah Miller. He listened to her entire story, not missing a single detail, from the recurring prophetic dreams to Emily's fearful confession before she disappeared. The office fell into a daunting silence. A murder case potentially being unveiled by a dream, it was a situation he had never encountered in his entire career. Logically and professionally, he knew this was an extremely weak lead, almost fantastical. He couldn't possibly write in a report that his source was a ghost. No judge, no prosecutor would ever approve a search warrant based solely on testimony about a dream. His first reaction was skepticism, thinking it might be the imaginings of a grieving mother whose mind, tormented by pain, was creating hallucinations. But on the other hand, an investigator's gut feeling told him this poor woman was not lying. The sheer terror in Sarah's eyes was real. And when he connected the story of the dream with the actual details in the file, the mysterious disappearance, the stepfather's somewhat forced demeanor, and especially her account of the daughter's complaints about being watched and her underwear going missing, a blurry but gruesome picture began to form. The dream might be a product of the subconscious, but that subconscious was built on real suspicions. He stood up and paced the room, his mind taut. He had to make a decision. If he ignored this testimony because it lacked legal grounding, a crime might be buried forever, and a monster would continue to roam free. But if he acted, on what basis would he proceed? If he was wrong, if it really was just a wild nightmare, he would face serious professional consequences. Finally, after much deliberation, he made a bold decision. He wouldn't apply for a search warrant. He would create a situation that would force the old fox to show his tail. "Mrs. Miller," he said to the woman waiting anxiously, "for now, I need you to go home and try to remain calm. Act as if nothing has happened. Don't let your husband suspect a thing. We will take measures to verify your statement. Please, trust us." After Sarah left, Lieutenant Riley immediately assembled a team of his most trusted detectives. A unique and detailed plan was drawn up. They would not approach the scene as police officers. They would arrive under a perfect cover. That afternoon, a specialized septic truck from County Environmental Services unexpectedly pulled up in front of Jack Bullock's farm. Lieutenant Riley, dressed in work overalls and a hard hat, along with several other detectives disguised as workers, walked in. "Afternoon, Mr. Bullock," Riley said casually. "We are an inspection team from the County Environmental Office. The county is conducting an urgent review of sanitation standards at large livestock farms to prevent potential groundwater contamination. We are here to inspect your pens and the waste disposal pit." Jack Bullock, though a little surprised by the unannounced inspection, couldn't refuse a routine administrative request. He led the inspection team to the area behind the house. The pig farm was quite large, with nearly 100 black hogs, and at the far end of the garden was a manure pit built of cement, about 100 square feet. The opening was crudely covered with a few wooden planks. A thick, foul stench rose from it. Lieutenant Riley glanced into the pit. It was filled with a dense slurry of pig manure and organic waste, nearly full to the top. "Your manure pit seems to be overloaded and unsanitary," he said to Jack in a serious tone. "Under the new disease prevention regulations, to ensure there's no contamination, we are going to have our team pump it out and treat the contents. The county will cover part of the cost." Hearing this, Jack Bullock's expression suddenly changed. His usual composure vanished, replaced by an unconcealable panic. He quickly waved his hands. No, that's not necessary, officer. My pit is still working fine. I'll take care of it myself in a few days. No need to trouble you all. Really, it's not necessary." The vehement refusal and panicked attitude did not escape Lieutenant Riley's professional eye. A normal farmer would never turn down a free service, especially one that was beneficial. This behavior, combined with the wife's testimony, confirmed one thing: the bottom of this manure pit was definitely hiding a terrible secret. Lieutenant Riley didn't argue with him. He turned and signaled to the detectives waiting outside. The specialized truck was backed right into the yard. This is a mandatory county ordinance during the peak disease prevention period. Not a suggestion, Lieutenant Riley said, his voice firm, leaving no room for refusal. We require your cooperation. Jack Bullock stood frozen, his face drained of all color. He looked at the truck, then back at the manure pit, his legs trembling. He knew the secret he had tried so hard to bury for the past 3 months was about to be dragged into the light. The high-powered pump roared to life, beginning its work. The loud engine noise shattered the garden's usual silence but couldn't drown out the suffocating tension in the air. Jack Bullock stood motionless in a corner of the yard, his face ashen. His large, calloused farmer's hands were clenched into fists, trembling uncontrollably. He tried to appear calm, but his panicked eyes, constantly darting towards the manure pit, betrayed him. Lieutenant Riley and his detectives stood at a safe distance, watching silently. All eyes were on the large suction hose as it slowly drew away the thick, foul-smelling waste. The work was slow. Suddenly, the pump's engine roared unnaturally and then sputtered out. The suction hose was blocked. "There's a large obstruction down there," the operator shouted. Everyone's hearts seemed to stop. 2 workers used long poles to poke through the remaining thick sludge at the bottom of the pit. And then they felt the poles hit something large, hard, and heavy, wrapped in something soft. They tried to move the object, and as it shifted slightly, a corner of a blue top emerged from the surface. "Stop," Lieutenant Riley commanded. "Everyone, hold your position. Forensics, get ready." There was no need to pump anymore. The truth was right before their eyes. In that instant, all of Jack Bullock's pretense, all his resistance, completely crumbled. He collapsed to the ground, his body shaking like a leaf. Lieutenant Riley turned to look straight at him, his voice as cold as ice. "Jack Bullock, you are under arrest on suspicion of murder." He offered no resistance, silently allowing the detectives to handcuff him and lead him away. His act was over. At the scene, the forensics team, clad in full protective gear, began their work. They carefully waded into the pit, clearing away the sludge around the strange object. Gradually, a large bundle, wrapped tightly in multiple layers of top, was revealed. A rope was cinched tightly around the bundle and tied to another heavy object, a large concrete block, estimated to weigh at least 65 pounds. When the bundle was lifted out of the pit and placed on a clean top, there was no longer any doubt. The shape of the bundle was clearly that of a human body. The crime had been exposed in the most horrific way imaginable. While Jack Bullock was being transported to the sheriff's office, the forensics team carefully used scissors to cut through the layers of rope and top, which had been soaking in waste for a long time. When the final layer was opened, the body of a young girl was revealed in a state of advanced decomposition. Although her face was unrecognizable, investigators immediately noticed the first signs of a brutal assault. The clothing on the victim's body had been intentionally ripped in several places. The body was immediately sealed and transported to the state forensics lab that night for an autopsy. The missing person case, which had seemingly hit a dead end, was now officially a homicide and sexual assault investigation with incredibly savage details. A few days later, the full forensic autopsy report was sent to the investigative team. It confirmed and further clarified the brutal extent of the crime Jack Bullock had committed, providing irrefutable, hard evidence. First, DNA analysis, cross-referenced with a sample from Sarah Miller, officially confirmed the victim was 18-year-old Emily Miller. The mother's tearful, prophetic dream was finally proven true by science. Second, the cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation. The forensic report detailed deep ligature marks and subcutaneous bruising on the victim's neck. The internal examination revealed a fractured hyoid bone. This was classic evidence confirming death by strangulation from an extremely powerful force. The time of death was determined to be approximately 3 months prior, perfectly matching the day Emily was reported to have run away. And third, the most horrific and infuriating detail. The examination confirmed beyond a doubt that before she died, Emily had been brutally sexually assaulted. The report stated the body was found nude with torn clothing, and an examination of the genital area revealed severe physical trauma. Most importantly, forensic examiners collected a significant amount of semen from inside the victim's body. The perpetrator's DNA was extracted by specialists, and when compared with Jack Bullock's DNA, the result was a perfect match. With the scientific findings and evidence recovered from the scene, the investigative team had an undeniable case file. In an interrogation room at the Boone County Sheriff's Office, Jack Bullock sat, his large frame seemingly collapsed. The calm, capable demeanor of a farm owner had vanished, leaving only failure and unconcealable fear. Across from him sat Lieutenant Mark Riley, along with the cold, hard scientific evidence. "Jack," Lieutenant Riley began, his voice calm but heavy with authority. "We have enough evidence to charge you. Emily's body has been identified. The forensic report is in. Your DNA was found on her body. Any denial at this point is futile. It's time for you to tell the truth." Jack Bullock was no longer defiant. He knew his act had ended the moment that pump was started. After a long silence, he lifted his head and began to confess to his entire horrific crime. His confession was a tragic story of perverted lust, alcohol-fueled loss of control, and a cruelly calculated act to conceal his crime. He admitted that for a long time, he had harbored sinful thoughts about his own stepdaughter. He said that as Emily grew into a beautiful 18-year-old, her innocence and vitality had awakened dark desires within him. He began to have improper intentions. "Every time my wife was away," Jack confessed, his voice hoarse, "and left me at home alone with her, I couldn't control my thoughts. I tried, but I couldn't." He admitted to repeatedly peeping on her while she showered and even committing the perverted act of stealing her underwear to satisfy his urges. On that fateful day, Sarah had to go to her old hometown to attend to a memorial for her mother and was staying overnight. Only he and Emily were home. He knew this was his chance. He started drinking corn whiskey in the afternoon. The alcohol acted as a catalyst, unleashing the demon of lust within him. By early evening, when he was buzzed, he saw Emily studying in her room. He could no longer restrain himself. He burst into her room and, despite her fierce resistance and pleas, used his strength to rape her. "After I was done," Jack continued, his eyes vacant, "she was huddled in the corner of the bed, sobbing. She looked at me with such hatred. She said as soon as her mother came back, she would tell her and the town pastor everything. She said she would make sure I rotted in prison. That threat became the girl's death sentence. The fear of being exposed, of facing legal punishment and the scorn of the community, completely overwhelmed any rational thought. In his panic, he realized the only way to silence this witness forever was to kill her. He lunged at her, using his own brutal hands to strangle her until she stopped breathing. He had murdered his wife's daughter just to cover up the crime of rape he had just committed. When the frenzy passed, he sat beside the child's body. Absolute fear consumed him. He had to dispose of the body. His eyes scanned the house, then settled on the garden behind it. He saw the manure pit. A monstrous idea flashed in his mind. It was deep enough, filthy enough, and he believed no one would ever think to look there. He waited until it was completely dark. He went to the shed, found a large concrete block and a length of rope. He coldly tied the block to the victim's body to ensure it would sink to the bottom. Then, he dragged Emily's body to the back of the garden and, in the dead of night, pushed the corpse into the manure pit, erasing all traces of the young girl's existence. The next day, when Sarah returned, he put on a perfect act. He fabricated the story of Emily talking back to him and running away. He even feigned anger, calling the child spoiled and rebellious. Sarah, in her grief and worry, completely believed her husband's lies without a shred of suspicion. Jack Bullock's confession laid bare the entire truth of the case. The missing person case that seemed to have hit a dead end was now completely solved. The confession from Jack Bullock closed the investigation into the mysterious disappearance of Emily Miller. From a file that seemed destined to go cold, the team had, in a matter of days, uncovered a horrifying truth and exposed the face of a demon in human form. The case file, complete with physical evidence, forensic results, and the killer's confession, was quickly finalized. But the work of Lieutenant Mark Riley and his colleagues was not over. Now, they faced a task even heavier and more painful than catching the criminal, informing Sarah Miller of the whole truth. The poor woman, who had bravely brought the only clue to the police, was still unaware of the full brutality of the crime and the horrifying truth about the husband with whom she had shared her life. Sarah was asked to come to the sheriff's office. She walked into Lieutenant Riley's office, her face haggard but with a glimmer of hope in her eyes, hope that the police had found her daughter, even if the news was the worst imaginable. Lieutenant Riley asked her to sit. He didn't know how to begin. He chose his words carefully, trying to speak as gently as possible. He informed her that they had found Emily's body and that the killer had been arrested. It was Jack Bullock. Hearing this, Sarah just went numb, tears beginning to stream down her face. The pain of losing her child was a reality she had somewhat prepared herself to face. But then, Lieutenant Riley was forced to tell her the rest of the truth, a truth more horrific than death itself. He told her about the forensic results, about how Emily had been brutally sexually assaulted before she was murdered. "I'm so sorry to have to tell you this," Lieutenant Riley said, his voice low. "The DNA sample recovered from Emily's body is a perfect match to Jack Bullock's." Those words hit Sarah harder than a bolt of lightning. She was stunned, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her husband, the man she had trusted with the rest of her life, had not only killed her daughter but had also done that depraved, beastly thing to her. "No, it can't be," she stammered, her whole body trembling. "You're lying. You must be lying, right?" He was her stepfather. The truth was too cruel, too inhuman. The poor woman's endurance had reached its limit. She let out a mournful, heart-wrenching scream and fainted in her chair. Female officers had to rush in to take her to the infirmary. Her grief was now multiplied by disgust, torment, and an overwhelming sense of guilt. She regretted not seeing the true face of the monster living beside her. She blamed herself for not believing her daughter, for dismissing the girl's fearful warnings about her stepfather's perverted behavior. Her own carelessness had indirectly pushed her daughter to her death. This burden of guilt she would likely carry for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, to build an ironclad case and leave the perpetrator with no chance of denial at trial, the investigative team decided to take a crucial procedural step, a crime scene reconstruction. A few days later, a police convoy brought Jack Bullock, dressed in a prison jumpsuit and carefully shackled, back to his own house. The entire farm area was strictly cordoned off, but many residents from the community had gathered from a distance, watching in silent, seething anger. The reconstruction began. Jack Bullock, now a mere shadow of his former self, shuffled forward, reenacting his entire crime under the close supervision of investigators and a representative from the prosecutor's office. His face was emotionless, but at times, one could still see an uncontrollable tremor in his cuffed hands. He pointed to Emily's small bedroom, the place where he had committed his beastly act. He mechanically reenacted how he had burst in, overpowered, and assaulted his stepdaughter. He pointed to the corner of the bed where she had sat crying and delivered her fateful threat. Next, he had to reenact the murder. Using a life-size mannequin, he showed how he had lunged forward, using both hands to squeeze the victim's neck. That moment, even as a reenactment, sent a chill down the spines of those watching. And finally, the disposal of the body. He showed the investigators where he had hidden the concrete block and the rope. He reenacted how he had tied the weight to the body and then dragged the corpse to the back garden. He stood at the edge of the now empty manure pit and pointed down, describing how he had pushed the body in to hide his crime. The entire reconstruction was meticulously filmed. It was living proof, an irrefutable confession, replaying the perpetrator's monstrous crime in the most naked detail. When the reconstruction concluded, Jack Bullock was escorted back to the transport vehicle. He walked through the familiar yard where he had once been a boss, a husband, a stepfather. Now, he was just a murderer awaiting justice's final judgment. Lieutenant Riley watched as the prison transport vehicle drove away. The case was perfectly solidified. He had done his duty, found the truth, and forced a monster to bow his head. But the investigator felt no sense of victory, only a deep sadness and a heavy heart. He knew the upcoming trial would be the end of a demon's life, but it could never heal the immense wounds inflicted upon those left behind. Jack Bullock's confession and the evidence gathered during the crime scene reconstruction closed the investigation. The case file, complete with physical evidence, forensic reports, the confession, and the reconstruction records, was quickly completed and forwarded to the county prosecutor's office to press charges. Several months later, the Boone County Superior Court opened the trial. Due to the exceptionally serious and savage nature of the crime, an incestuous act that trampled on the most basic moral values, the trial attracted significant public attention. Jack Bullock was brought before the court to face the law. He no longer had the panicked look from when he was first arrested. Instead, He remained silent, head bowed, throughout the proceedings. The most important and most heartbroken witness at the trial was Sarah Miller. As both the victim's mother and the defendant's wife, she had to once again recount her family's entire tragedy. She spoke of her daughter's disappearance, her husband's lies, and the terrifying, prophetic dreams that spurred her to seek justice. Every word she spoke was like a knife twisting in the hearts of everyone present. Alongside her testimony, the prosecution presented the irrefutable scientific evidence. The forensic autopsy report was read aloud in court, detailing the strangulation marks, the fractured hyoid bone, and most importantly, the DNA results confirming the semen collected from a victim's body was a perfect match to Jack Bullock's. Finally, the video of the crime scene reconstruction was shown. The image of the stepfather coldly re-enacting his beastly acts sent a wave of extreme outrage through the courtroom. Any path to denial was cut off. Faced with the undeniable evidence, the court found Jack Bullock's actions to be exceptionally cruel, devoid of humanity, and beyond any possibility of rehabilitation. He had exploited his family's trust and his position as a stepfather to commit a depraved act. And when threatened with exposure, he had ruthlessly murdered to silence his victim. The barbaric manner of disposing of the body further demonstrated the defendant's animalistic nature and disregard for the law. On multiple counts of rape and murder with aggravating circumstances, the court sentenced the defendant, Jack Bullock, to the highest penalty, death. The death sentence was a fitting punishment for the crime he had committed, bringing a measure of justice for the soul of the ill-fated young girl. But for Sarah Miller, that sentence could never soothe the pain and torment in her soul. After the trial, she returned to the house, which had become cold and desolate. She sold the hog farm and lived alone, a shadow of her former self. The pain of losing her child was now magnified by another psychological burden, guilt. She tormented herself every day. She regretted not recognizing the true face of her monstrous husband sooner. She blamed herself for not believing her daughter, for dismissing the girl's fearful warnings about her stepfather's sick behavior. If only I had believed her then, she would sob alone in the night. If only I hadn't left her alone with that demon. It's all my fault. She also felt guilty for having believed his lies, for letting her daughter lie in that cold pit for 3 months without knowing. The whispers of neighbors, whether of pity or blame, were like invisible knives constantly digging into her wounds. The house that was once a home had now become a prison, holding her captive with her horrific memories. This case reveals the darkest corners that can exist within family relationships, where sacred trust is trampled by perverted desire. The stepfather's crime is a stark warning about the danger of the beast that can hide behind the mask of a normal person and about the vulnerability of children in blended families. The case also shows a strange truth, that sometimes the truth is not found through the most logical investigative methods but is revealed by the unexplainable, like a prophetic dream. It serves as a reminder that no crime, no matter how deeply buried under the filth of deceit, can be hidden forever from the sacred pain and intuition of a mother.